Hey bio fans, David here from the Biography Wrap, and today we are going to explore the story of Chris Gardner through the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, directed by Gabriele Muccino. The movie begins in San Francisco in 1981, where Christopher Gardner describes his first meeting with his father when he was 28, and how he decided that whenever he had children, they would know who their father is. He then starts describing this part of his life story as riding the bus. Chris attempts to sell his portable bone density machine, which he has spent the majority of his life savings on, to various doctors and hospitals, but they reject him. He has to sell at least 2 of them a month in order to pay rent and taxes, and another one just to afford the additional costs. He is going to have to file a tax extension, which means extra interest and a penalty. When Linda hears about the extension, she becomes extremely angry and bitter. The woman gets furious and leaves for work. The next day, while selling the machine, Chris meets someone with a beautiful car and asks how he managed to afford it. The man tells him he is a stockbroker and that he only needs 2 things to succeed. He has to be good at numbers as well as have good people skills. His wife laughs at him when he tells her that he is going to look for a job as a stockbroker. Chris gets upset. Further, Linda reminds him that they haven't paid rent for 3 months and that she has been working double shifts as a hotel maid for 4 months now, and she leaves. On the way to an interview, he leaves his bone density machine with a woman on the street. This part is titled "Being Stupid" by him. He notices that the girl he left the machine with was running away with it during the interview. When he tries to catch her, she escapes. While leaving his son Chris Jr. for daycare one day, Chris tells him that he had the nickname 10-gallon head because he was smart when he was young. The next day, he spots the girl who took his machine and chases her. Eventually, he gets a hold of her and is able to retrieve his machine. Linda becomes furious when she sees that he has returned with 2 machines. He encounters Mr. Twistle, a lead manager and partner at Dean Witter Reynolds one day. The 2 of them make their way into a cab, and Chris shows him that he can solve the Rubik's Cube, which was practically impossible for everyone at the time. Twistle exits the cab and leaves Chris to pay. It is obvious that Chris does not have enough money, so he gets out of the cab and runs for the subway, clutching the machine in his hand. He almost makes it onto the train at the station, but cannot get the machine in as the doors close. When he calls Linda, she tells him that she is leaving with their son. Chris gets on a bus and rushes home. As he is on his way, he starts thinking about Thomas Jefferson and the pursuit of happiness he pursued. Chris wonders that maybe happiness is something one can only pursue and never actually have. When he returns home, he finds his wife and son are gone. He receives a call from Jay Twistle, who says he wants to meet Chris the day after tomorrow. He gives Chris his secretary's number that Chris memorizes as he couldn't find a piece of paper to write it down. The next day, he runs into Linda, who tells him that she is not happy anymore and wants to leave. Chris says she can leave, but their son will stay with him. Linda doesn't reply and walks away. He goes to pick up Chris Jr. from his daycare. He asks him if he is happy, and Chris Jr. says that he is. In the evening, the landlord comes and says that he needs Chris to pay the rent, and he also needs Chris to vacate the apartment by the following morning so that painters can come to paint it. As Chris says he needs more time, the landlord agrees to let him stay 1 more week, as long as he paints the house during the week that he stays. 2 police officers come over to his place while he is painting and tell him that he has to pay for the numerous parking tickets he has accumulated. That night, he had to stay in jail. He calls Linda and tells her to take Chris Jr., as he won't. Linda tells him she will get him back by the next day. On the following day, he is released and rushes off for his meeting with Jay Twistle at Dean Witter in the same dirty clothes that he had worn the night before. He convinces the board members to offer him the internship at the meeting. As Chris leaves the office, he tells Jay that he will let him know if he will be joining the firm. Jay gets confused and Chris states that he did not know there would be no pay and that his situation is difficult. Jay gives him until the end of the night to make up his mind. There is a possibility that he could find a way to get by with an internship if he sells 6 scanners, but he is still a little unsure. Eventually, night falls, and Chris Jr. finally appears with Linda. As they put him to bed, Linda tells Chris that she will go to New York for a job opportunity, and that since Chris Jr. is her son and she is his mom, she should have him with her. However, Chris counters that she won't be able to take care of him. Linda agrees and leaves immediately. After accepting the internship at Dean Witter, he begins packing to leave his current residence. While playing basketball with his son, Chris tells him that he probably will not be very good at it. Seeing Chris Jr. upset, Chris tells him to never let anyone tell him that he can't accomplish anything, not even him. He has to protect his dream. On that day, Chris is able to sell one of his machines, giving him some extra money to get by. Chris describes this part of his life as an internship. He begins his competitive internship to become a stockbroker. On a break, he sees a man running with his machine, which he had lost earlier at the subway station. He starts chasing him but gets hit by a car. Even though Chris is not severely injured, he starts walking with a limp and loses one of his shoes. He continues on with his day without one of his shoes. Although he begins to put in more effort and work harder, he feels underrated and unappreciated. He stops drinking water so as to avoid wasting time going to the bathroom. Furthermore, he also has to work up a list of potential clients in 6 hours that others do in 9 hours because he has to take care of his son. Instead of working his way up the list, he decides to call the top of the list, Mr. Ribbon, a CEO. Ribbon offers him a meeting if Chris can arrive there within 20 minutes. On his way out, his chief asks him to park his car, which causes him to be late. The following weekend, Chris goes to see Mr. Ribbon to apologize for not being able to attend the meeting. While leaving, Ribbon offers them to go to the football game with them, and Chris Jr. happily agrees. Chris tries to talk Ribbon about the job at the game, but Ribbon declines and says they should watch the game. After 4 months, he sells all of their scanners, and life is pretty good. But then he receives a tax notice. Chris calls this part of his life paying taxes. According to the letter, he has to pay $600, but he only has $21.33 in his bank account. He starts delaying the payment to his new landlord. One day, he takes Chris Jr. to the park. There, he sees a man with one of his machines. The machine is eventually recovered, and he immediately goes on a spree to sell it, but he fails. Once he gets home, he discovers his stuff has been thrown out by the landlord. He asks Chris Jr. to come with him, but he throws a tantrum. Chris Jr. gets picked up, and they get out of there. The two go to a friend's house, but he doesn't help them, so they go to the subway station. At the station, Chris tells his son that his machine is a time machine. They press a button and close their eyes, and when they open their eyes again, Chris pretends that they have traveled back in time, and they have encountered dinosaurs. They then go into the public restroom at the station and stay the night there. On another evening, he goes to a women's shelter. The lady there says she cannot let them stay, but recommends another shelter. After some hustle, they eventually find a room for the night. He puts Chris Jr. to bed and goes outside the room to start working on the machine. He stays up all night and reads for his internship. Chris starts working harder and earns to finish his job fast as he has to rush and get in line by 5 to get a room in the shelter. He goes to church proceedings to get food and continues reading his book there as he has a test the next day. The next day, he takes his test early and gets in line but cannot get a room. Chris donates blood the next day to raise some money and then buys a bulb to fix his bone scanner. That night, Chris is finally able to fix his machine and soon sells it, getting $250, which would help him get by for 4 weeks. They spend a night in a hotel and rest peacefully. Chris continues to work as a broker and makes sales. On his last day at work, his chief calls him to meet with the board members. They offer him a job at the firm, and Chris gladly accepts while holding in tears of happiness. He calls this part of his life happiness. He starts working there and in 1987 opens his own investment firm called Gardner Rich. In 2006, he proceeds to sell a minority stake in his firm in a multi-million-dollar deal. That's it from the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing. Let me know what you thought of this true story and make sure to check out the next one.